She had started noticing small changes in her body that she couldn't ignore. At first, she brushed them off, thinking it was just stress or fatigue. But as days passed, the changes became more obvious, impossible to ignore. Her usual routine of life, waking up, working, cooking, laughing with friends, was suddenly accompanied by moments of unease and worry. Her stomach often felt queasy in the mornings, and her energy seemed to vanish by midday. Even simple tasks like climbing a few stairs left her unusually breathless. It was more than just fatigue. She realized that her periods were late, something that never happened before. In the past, her cycle had been almost clockwork, like a silent, predictable rhythm of her life. Now the irregularity made her pause and think, could it be possible? The idea started forming in her mind, small at first, like a whisper she tried to ignore. Then it grew louder with each passing day. She thought to herself, could I really be pregnant? The thought brought a swirl of emotions. There was curiosity, excitement, and yes, a touch of fear. She imagined what it would mean for her life. Would she be ready? How would her family react? How would her friends react? Questions buzzed in her mind constantly, turning simple moments into tiny storms of anxiety. Yet alongside the fear, there was a strange warmth, an unspoken hope that maybe, just maybe, life was about to change in a beautiful way. She tried to find signs in her body. She noticed her appetite changing. Sometimes she wanted to eat everything in sight, while at other times even the smell of food made her feel nauseous. Her clothes began to feel a little tighter around her waist, though she knew it was not weight gain. Her emotions were shifting too. She found herself crying at moments she normally wouldn't. A touching scene in a movie, a song on the radio, even a casual conversation could make her eyes well up. It was confusing, almost surreal, but it added to the growing conviction in her mind. Something was happening in her body, something she could not yet fully understand. One afternoon, while sitting with a cup of tea, she finally confided in a close friend. She hesitated at first, twisting the cup in her hands, her heart racing. I think I might be pregnant, she admitted quietly, barely looking up. Her friend's eyes widened, a mixture of surprise and curiosity spreading across their face. Really, are you sure? They asked. She shook her head, unsure. I don't know. That's why I'm so confused. My periods are late, I feel strange, but I don't know for sure. Her friend reached out, taking her hand gently. Well, the only way to know is to see a doctor, right? Don't panic. Whatever happens, we'll figure it out together. Those words, though simple, gave her a tiny sense of relief. She realized she didn't have to face this alone. She made an appointment with a doctor, her mind filled with a mix of hope, fear, and curiosity. She kept imagining what it would feel like if she were pregnant. Tiny kicks, a growing belly, the idea of nurturing a life inside her. The thought made her smile, but it also made her anxious. What if it wasn't true? What if it was something else entirely? The night before her appointment, she couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about what the doctor might say. She imagined the doctor confirming her pregnancy. She imagined herself smiling, feeling a rush of happiness that she had never felt before. She also imagined the opposite, that she wasn't pregnant and these changes meant something else. That thought made her stomach tighten. She had read stories online of women experiencing similar symptoms, only to discover rare conditions instead of pregnancy. But she quickly pushed the thought away. Tonight, she decided she would hold on to hope. The next morning, she woke up early, feeling a strange mixture of excitement and nervousness. The city outside was just waking up too. The distant hum of traffic, birds chirping in the trees, people beginning their day. She got ready, dressed carefully, and tried to calm her racing heart. Each step she took toward the clinic felt heavier than usual, weighed down by the unknown. Yet there was also a sense of determination. She knew she had to find out the truth, no matter what it was. At the clinic, the atmosphere was calm and professional. The receptionist smiled as she explained her situation and took a seat, trying to distract herself with magazines in the waiting room. But it was no use. Her mind kept returning to the possibility of being pregnant, to the changes in her body, and the uncertainty that had taken over her life in the past few weeks. When her name was called, she felt her stomach tighten, and she followed the nurse into the examination room, her heart pounding in her chest. The doctor entered with a kind, reassuring smile. He listened carefully as she explained her symptoms, the missed periods, the fatigue, the nausea, and the emotional swings. He nodded thoughtfully, jotting notes in his clipboard, and then asked her a few more questions to understand her situation fully. "Don't worry," he said gently. "We'll figure this out together. Let's start with a basic test and take it step by step." His calm and professional demeanor offered her some comfort, and she felt a little lighter. The first test was a simple pregnancy test, the kind that gives results in a few minutes. She sat on the edge of the examination bed, hands folded in her lap, trying to control her breathing. She imagined both outcomes, the moment the test confirmed her pregnancy and the moment it showed she wasn't. Each scenario carried a different weight of emotion. A small part of her hoped for confirmation, while another part secretly feared it. She reminded herself to be strong, to accept whatever the result might be. The minutes felt like hours. Finally, the doctor returned with the test results, and his expression made her stomach flip. There was a seriousness in his face that she wasn't expecting. He didn't speak immediately, and she felt a growing knot of anxiety. Her mind raced, trying to guess what he was about to say. Then he finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. "The test shows that you are not pregnant. But there are some unusual things in your results that I want to investigate further." Confusion washed over her. She blinked, trying to process the words. Not pregnant? But all these symptoms, how could they exist if she wasn't? Her heart felt heavy and fear began to creep in. "What do you mean, unusual things?" she asked quietly, her voice trembling. The doctor explained that while the test was negative for pregnancy, some of her hormone levels were unusual. He recommended further tests, including an ultrasound, to better understand what was happening inside her body. She nodded, feeling a mix of relief and fear. Relief that she wasn't unexpectedly pregnant, but fear of the unknown. What could be causing her body to act this way? The doctor's calm assurance helped a little, but the uncertainty was still a heavy weight. She realized that the journey she thought would be about confirming pregnancy was about to take a very different turn, one she could not yet imagine. As she left the clinic that day, she walked slowly, lost in thought. The streets were busy, people rushing past her, but she felt strangely isolated in her own world of uncertainty. She knew that her life was about to change, not in the way she had imagined, but in a way that would test her strength and resilience. The first step of the journey had ended, but the real story, the real discovery, was just beginning. That night, she sat by her window looking out at the city lights. Her mind was a whirlwind of emotions, but she found a small sense of determination within herself. Whatever lay ahead, she would face it. She would uncover the truth about her body, about herself, and about life's unpredictable nature. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time she felt a spark of courage, a readiness to face the unknown. And with that spark, the first chapter of her unexpected journey came to an end, leaving her on the edge of a discovery that would change her life forever. The next morning, she woke with a mixture of dread and curiosity. The events of the previous day played over and over in her mind. She kept thinking about the doctor's words. Her pregnancy test was negative, yet something unusual was happening in her body. The uncertainty weighed on her, but at the same time there was a spark of determination inside her. She knew she had to see the doctor again and follow through with the tests. She dressed carefully, choosing clothes that were comfortable but also made her feel a little confident. Even small things mattered when her mind was in turmoil. On the way to the clinic, her thoughts raced. Could it be a hormone imbalance? A cyst, something more serious? She tried not to panic, but the unknown always had a way of sneaking in and filling her mind with worry. Every small noise, the honk of a car, the chatter of people on the street, made her heart beat a little faster. When she arrived at the clinic, the receptionist greeted her warmly, and she felt a brief sense of calm. The familiarity of the place, the routine of checking in, was comforting. She took a seat in the waiting area, clutching her bag in her lap. Around her, other patients came and went, each absorbed in their own worries. She couldn't help but notice how life went on for everyone else, while her own world felt paused. Caught in a strange, uncertain moment, soon, her name was called, and she followed the nurse down a corridor she had walked many times before. But today it felt different. Every step she took brought her closer to answers she wasn't sure she wanted, but desperately needed. The examination room smelled faintly of antiseptic, a smell she had grown accustomed to but which now seemed sharper, almost foreboding. She sat on the edge of the bed, trying to steady her breathing, while the nurse prepared the equipment for an ultrasound. The doctor entered shortly after, smiling gently. His presence was calming, but it also reminded her of the seriousness of the situation. He explained the procedure and reassured her that this would help them understand exactly what was happening inside her body. As he spoke, she nodded, trying to focus on his words and not the whirlwind of thoughts in her head. She placed her hand on her stomach almost instinctively, as if it could somehow shield her from the unknown. The doctor began the ultrasound, moving the small device slowly across her abdomen. The screen lit up with shades of gray, shapes forming and disappearing as he moved the probe. She watched silently, her pulse quickening with every movement. She wanted to see signs of life, a confirmation of what she had hoped for, but part of her also feared that the images might reveal something completely unexpected. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of the machine, and in that silence she felt the weight of anticipation pressing down on her. After a few minutes, the doctor paused, studying the images carefully. His expression was serious, and a cold wave of anxiety ran through her. "There's something unusual here," he said gently. She tried to speak, but her voice caught in her throat. What is it?" she asked, her fingers gripping the edge of the bed. The doctor explained that what they were seeing was not a pregnancy at all. Her body was showing changes that mimicked pregnancy, but something else entirely was going on. She felt a mix of relief and fear. Relief that she wasn't unexpectedly pregnant, yet fear of the unknown. She asked the doctor to explain further. He told her that her hormone levels were higher than normal in some areas, which could cause the body to mimic pregnancy symptoms. There were several possibilities, including rare conditions that could affect her reproductive organs or other parts of her endocrine system. The words were heavy, unfamiliar, and frightening, but the doctor's calm tone kept her from panicking completely. As he spoke, she realized how much she had taken her body for granted. She had always assumed that her cycles, her energy, and her health were predictable, controllable, and reliable. Now all of that felt fragile. Her mind raced with questions. How long had this been happening? Could it get worse? Was it dangerous? The doctor assured her that while the situation needed attention, most of these conditions were treatable if detected early. His reassurance was a small comfort, but the uncertainty lingered. After the ultrasound, she was asked to undergo additional tests, a series of blood tests, and possibly an MRI to rule out any serious conditions. She agreed, feeling a mixture of exhaustion and determination. Each test felt like another step into the unknown, but she knew it was necessary. Waiting for the results became an exercise in patience, though patience had never been her strong suit. Every time her phone buzzed, she jumped, hoping it wasn't a call with alarming news. Every day was filled with cautious hope and quiet fear. At home, she tried to distract herself. She cooked, cleaned, and went for walks, trying to maintain a sense of normalcy. But her mind always wandered back to the clinic, to the images on the ultrasound screen, to the doctor's words. She kept imagining what could be wrong, each scenario more dramatic than the last. She scolded herself for panicking, telling herself that the doctor was careful and professional. Still, the anxiety refused to leave completely. She confided in her closest friends again, sharing what the doctor had said. Their reactions were a mixture of concern and reassurance. They reminded her that she wasn't alone, that whatever happened, she had support. One friend even joked lightly to ease her tension, "Well, at least you know it's not a baby surprise." The humor made her laugh, and for a moment, the weight on her shoulders lifted. It was a small but meaningful relief, a reminder that she didn't have to carry this uncertainty entirely by herself. A few days later, the blood test results arrived. The doctor reviewed them carefully, comparing them with her previous results. Some of the hormone levels were indeed unusual, confirming that her body had been sending mixed signals. The doctor explained that the next step was to conduct imaging tests to get a complete picture of what was happening internally. He reassured her that while the situation was rare, it was manageable, and catching it now was crucial for effective treatment. The thought of more tests made her nervous. The idea of undergoing an MRI felt intimidating, the loud noises, the confined space, but she knew it was necessary. She tried to focus on the positive. This was a step toward understanding her body, toward finding answers. She reminded herself that uncertainty was temporary, and that knowledge, no matter how unsettling, was empowering. She was determined not to let fear control her decisions. During the waiting period, she began noticing subtle changes in herself again. Sometimes she felt bloated. Other times her stomach made strange noises that reminded her of pregnancy. She caught herself instinctively rubbing her belly, as if expecting to feel a life inside her. The contradictions of her symptoms, both real and imagined, kept her on edge. Yet, she also started observing her body more closely, paying attention to details she had previously ignored. Each small observation was a clue, a tiny piece of the puzzle that she was determined to solve. The emotional journey was just as taxing as the physical one. She experienced waves of hope and despair in the same day. One moment she imagined herself finally understanding her body, feeling relieved and empowered. The next she pictured something serious, a condition that could change her life in ways she couldn't control. She realized that this journey wasn't just about tests and results. It was about learning to cope with uncertainty, about finding strength she didn't know she had. Finally, the day came for her imaging tests. She arrived at the hospital early, her stomach tight with nerves. The MRI machine looked intimidating, a large tube that seemed both futuristic and cold. She tried to focus on her breathing, to calm the racing thoughts in her mind. The technician guided her carefully, explaining each step. She lay still, listening to the rhythmic thumping of the machine, imagining herself as calm and steady as she could be. Every thump of the MRI seemed to echo her heartbeat, reminding her of the tension and anticipation she carried. After the imaging was complete, she returned home to wait for the doctor's call. The waiting was the hardest part, hours stretching into a day, each moment filled with speculation. She distracted herself with books, walks, and cooking, but every quiet moment reminded her of the uncertainty. She knew that soon everything would change, either for relief or for shock. Her mind oscillated between hope and fear, but she resolved to face whatever the results might reveal with courage and grace. The day of the doctor's follow-up arrived, and she felt a mix of nerves and anticipation unlike anything she had experienced before. After days of waiting, worrying, imagining every possible outcome, she was finally going to hear what was truly happening inside her body. She tried to stay calm, but the fluttering in her stomach betrayed her. The taxi ride to the clinic felt longer than usual, each bump on the road echoing her anxious heartbeat. She gripped her bag tightly, reminding herself to take deep breaths, to stay composed. When she entered the clinic, the familiar sights and smells greeted her, but nothing felt ordinary anymore. Everything carried a weight of expectation. The receptionist smiled, but she hardly noticed. Her mind was entirely focused on the upcoming conversation with the doctor, the moment that could change everything. She waited quietly in the small, sterile waiting room, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her eyes occasionally flicking to the clock on the wall. Time seemed to stretch endlessly. Finally, the doctor called her name. She rose, her legs slightly unsteady, and followed him into the examination room. His calm demeanor usually put her at ease, but today she sensed a seriousness in his face she hadn't noticed before. He gestured for her to sit, and she did, trying to steady her breathing. She noticed the file he held in his hands and the way he studied it carefully. There was a pause, a silence that felt heavier than words, and she felt her heart race even faster. "Thank you for coming in today," the doctor began gently. "I have reviewed your test results and the imaging carefully. There's something unusual we need to discuss." She felt a shiver run down her spine. "Unusual? What do you mean?" she asked, her voice small, almost trembling. The doctor took a deep breath and continued. "You are not pregnant. However, your body is showing symptoms that mimic pregnancy. This is caused by a condition that is very rare, and it requires attention, but it is treatable." Her mind tried to process the words. Not pregnant, rare condition, treatable. Each phrase collided with the others, creating a whirlwind of confusion, fear, and relief. She felt a mixture of emotions she couldn't name, relief that she wasn't pregnant, but also fear and anxiety about what this condition could mean. Her hands trembled slightly and she clasped them together, as if holding herself steady could somehow make sense of the situation. The doctor explained further, speaking slowly and carefully. He said that her hormone levels had been unusually high in certain areas, which caused her body to exhibit symptoms like missed periods, nausea, fatigue, and even emotional fluctuations. These symptoms were very similar to those experienced during pregnancy, which explained why she had been so certain she was expecting. But the imaging and tests had revealed that there was no baby. Instead, her body was responding to these abnormal hormone levels. She listened intently, her mind racing. She asked questions. Could this be dangerous? Could it get worse? Was it something that might affect her in the future? The doctor answered patiently, assuring her that while rare, the condition was manageable. He explained the treatment options, which involved careful monitoring, medication, and sometimes minor procedures to correct the underlying issue. The doctor emphasized that early detection was important, and she had been fortunate to come in when she did. Despite the reassurance, she felt a wave of fear. The uncertainty of her body, the fact that it had been sending her mixed signals for weeks, left her feeling vulnerable in a way she had never experienced. She realized how much she had taken her health for granted, assuming that everything in her body was predictable and reliable. Now everything felt fragile, and the thought of her body behaving in ways she couldn't control was unsettling. After the initial explanation, the doctor gave her time to absorb the news. She sat silently, staring at the floor, letting the reality sink in. Relief slowly mingled with anxiety. She wasn't pregnant, but her body had deceived her. And the reason was something rare and unfamiliar. It was hard to wrap her mind around the situation. She had imagined a future with a baby, thinking about names, nursery decorations, and the joy of motherhood. All those plans vanished in an instant, replaced by uncertainty and the need to focus on her health. She asked the doctor to explain the condition in more detail. He described it as a hormonal imbalance that could trigger symptoms almost identical to pregnancy. He reassured her that it was not life-threatening if treated properly, but emphasized that ignoring it could lead to complications. Hearing that it was treatable offered her a small sense of hope, but she also realized that life would be temporarily disrupted. She would need regular visits, medication, and careful observation. The idea of her daily life being influenced by this condition made her anxious, yet she understood it was necessary for her well-being. Leaving the clinic that day, she felt a strange mix of emotions. On one hand, she was relieved that she wasn't pregnant, and that the doctor had identified the cause of her symptoms. On the other hand, the reality of a rare condition taking over her body weighed heavily on her. The streets outside seemed familiar, yet her perspective had shifted. Every passing car, every bustling person reminded her that life continued for everyone else, while her own world had been unexpectedly altered. At home, she reflected on the doctor's words. She realized how easily she had assumed her body's signals were straightforward and normal. Now she had to pay closer attention, learn about her health, and face challenges she had never imagined. She spent hours reading about her condition, trying to understand what had happened and how to manage it. The more she learned, the more she appreciated the importance of being aware and proactive about health. Knowledge became her ally, offering clarity and guidance amid the uncertainty. Emotionally, the news was exhausting. She experienced a roller coaster of feelings: relief, anxiety, fear, curiosity, and even frustration. There were moments when she felt grateful, thankful that it was not pregnancy and that the doctor had caught the problem early. Then, moments later, fear would return. As she thought about the rare nature of her condition and the uncertainty of the treatment process, she realized that this experience was as much about emotional resilience as it was about physical health. She reached out to her closest friend, sharing the news in detail. Her friend listened patiently, offering comfort, understanding, and support. They reminded her that she was not alone, that this was a challenge they would face together. The friend's words helped her feel less isolated, and for the first time in days she felt a sense of grounding. She realized that while the journey ahead might be difficult, she didn't have to navigate it alone. Support, she understood, would be crucial in the coming weeks. In the following days, she prepared for the treatment plan the doctor had suggested. She organized her schedule to accommodate doctor visits, medication timings, and rest periods. She began keeping a diary of her symptoms, tracking every small change in her body. Each entry helped her feel more in control, offering a tangible way to monitor her progress and communicate with her doctor. The act of writing became a form of therapy, helping her process the complex emotions she was experiencing. She also started talking to her family, carefully explaining the situation. Their initial reactions were a mixture of concern and relief. They asked questions, expressed support, and reminded her to take care of herself. The process of sharing her situation with her family made her feel less alone and more empowered. She realized that openness and honesty were key in managing not just the physical aspects of her condition, but the emotional ones as well. As the treatment began, she noticed gradual changes. Some symptoms that had plagued her, like nausea and fatigue, started to ease. She felt small victories each day, moments of energy, clearer thinking, and emotional stability. These small improvements boosted her morale, reinforcing the idea that she could navigate this challenge successfully. Each day, she reminded herself to be patient, to accept that recovery and treatment would take time, and to celebrate the progress she made, no matter how small. She also reflected deeply on the emotional journey she had undertaken. The initial belief that she was pregnant had brought excitement and hope, only to be replaced by shock and uncertainty. But through this experience, she discovered an inner strength she hadn't known existed. She realized that life didn't always unfold as expected, but resilience, determination, and support could guide her through even the most confusing moments. By the end of this part of her journey, she began to accept her reality. The rare condition had been identified, treatment had started, and she had learned the importance of listening to her body. She understood that while the experience had been frightening, it had also taught her valuable lessons about health, emotional resilience, and the unpredictability of life. She felt a quiet sense of empowerment, knowing that she could face challenges head-on, even when life took unexpected turns. The days after the doctor's revelation were some of the hardest she had ever faced. The initial shock had settled into a quiet, heavy weight that lingered in her chest. She woke each morning with a strange mix of relief and unease. Relief that she was not pregnant. Relief that the condition was treatable, but unease about the uncertainty that had entered her life. Even simple things like making breakfast or stepping out into the sun felt different. Every action carried a subtle awareness that her body was no longer completely predictable, and that took a toll on her spirit. She tried to keep herself busy, filling her time with work, chores, and small errands. But whenever she paused, her mind returned to the tests, the doctor's words, and the rare condition she now had to manage. She found herself thinking, why me? Why now? The questions had no answers, and the lack of clarity only heightened her anxiety. She realized she was grieving a life she had imagined, a future where she might have been a mother, where everything seemed simple and normal. It was strange to mourn something that hadn't yet existed, but the emotions were real and heavy. Her closest friend noticed the change in her demeanor. During one afternoon visit, they sat together in the living room, sunlight streaming through the window, a quiet contrast to the storm inside her mind. "You look tired," the friend said softly. "Are you okay?" She shook her head, trying to smile, but the effort felt weak. "I don't know," she admitted. "I keep thinking about everything. About my body, about what's happening. I can't stop worrying." Her friend reached out and took her hand, squeezing gently. "It's okay to feel this way. You're dealing with a lot, and it's normal to be scared and frustrated. You're not alone." The words helped her, even if only a little. She realized she had been carrying her fear in silence, trying to appear composed as if admitting vulnerability would make things worse. But sharing her feelings, letting someone in, gave her a sense of relief. For the first time since the diagnosis, she felt that she didn't have to face this alone. That realization became a small anchor for her in the turbulent sea of emotion she was experiencing. Over the next few days, she began to research her condition more thoroughly. The internet offered both information and confusion, but she focused on credible medical sources, trying to understand what her body had gone through. She read about women who had experienced similar hormonal imbalances, some of them facing years of uncertainty before treatment. She learned that while the condition was rare, it was not impossible to manage, and that recovery was achievable with patience and care. Each piece of knowledge provided a tiny measure of control over the chaos she felt inside. Despite the reassurance, there were moments when fear returned with intensity. Sometimes she felt her stomach twist in ways that reminded her of pregnancy symptoms. Sometimes she felt fatigued or emotionally sensitive, and each time, a surge of panic rose in her chest. She had to remind herself repeatedly. These symptoms were part of the condition, not a hidden pregnancy. It took time, effort, and conscious thinking to separate fear from reality. Gradually, she began learning to observe her body without judgment, to notice symptoms without letting panic take over. She also started a small journal, documenting her daily experiences, her symptoms, and her emotions. At first, the act of writing felt tedious, but soon it became a therapeutic exercise. She could pour out her thoughts on paper, giving them structure and clarity. She wrote about the frustration of uncertainty, the fear of rare conditions, and the moments of hope she found in her research. Each entry allowed her to process emotions she had previously bottled up. And over time, the journal became a tool of empowerment, a way to regain some sense of control in a situation that had seemed completely unpredictable. Her family became an important part of her coping process as well. They called regularly, checking in on her health and well-being. They offered practical help like preparing meals or accompanying her to appointments, but also emotional support, listening without judgment, comforting her, and reminding her that she was not alone. Their presence, even in small gestures, helped her navigate the emotional challenges of the diagnosis. She realized that her strength wasn't just in herself. It came from the network of people who cared for her. Emotionally, she began to notice small shifts in herself. Where fear had dominated before, moments of curiosity started to emerge. She began to appreciate her body in new ways, recognizing that despite the rare condition, it had been sending signals to protect her and alert her to something unusual. She learned to listen to her body more carefully, noticing subtle changes and giving herself permission to rest when needed. These small steps were empowering, turning a frightening experience into an opportunity for self-awareness and growth. She also reflected on the lessons she was learning about life. The experience had forced her to confront uncertainty in a way she had never had to before. Plans she had taken for granted, expectations she had held about her body and her future had been disrupted. She realized that life was unpredictable, and control was often an illusion. Accepting this truth wasn't easy, but it gradually gave her a sense of peace. She began to focus on what she could manage, her emotions, her health, and her attitude toward the situation, rather than dwelling on the things beyond her control. Support from friends continued to play a crucial role. Conversations that were once casual now carried deeper meaning. She talked openly about her fears, her frustrations, and even the small victories she noticed in her treatment. Her friends celebrated with her when she felt more energetic, when her symptoms eased, or when a doctor's appointment went well. These shared moments reinforced the idea that even in uncertainty, connection and understanding could provide strength. She realized that leaning on others didn't make her weak, it made her stronger. She also began to reconnect with activities she loved but had neglected during the stress of her diagnosis. Simple pleasures like walking in the park, reading books, or cooking her favorite meals became moments of healing. Each activity helped her ground herself, to remember that life continued even amid challenges. She started seeing her situation not as a sentence but as a chapter, a difficult yet formative chapter in her life that she could navigate with resilience and care. Over time, she began to see her progress. Symptoms that had felt overwhelming began to ease slightly, and she noticed herself feeling more emotionally stable. The combination of treatment, rest, and mindful observation of her body started to bring a sense of normalcy back into her life. She realized that healing wasn't just about physical recovery, it was about emotional adjustment, learning to live with uncertainty and embracing the support around her. Reflecting on the journey so far, she recognized the personal growth that had come from it. She had learned patience, resilience, and the value of support. She had discovered her own strength in facing the unknown, and she had gained a deeper understanding of her body and her health. Though the experience had been frightening, it had also been enlightening, teaching her to face life's unpredictability with courage and grace. By the end of this part of her journey, she felt a sense of cautious optimism. The rare condition had not defeated her. It had challenged her, but she had responded with awareness, strength, and openness. She understood that the road ahead would still have difficulties, but she had gained the tools to navigate them. She knew she could face the next stage of treatment, face the future with clarity, and embrace the lessons her body and her experiences had taught her. In quiet moments, she would sit and reflect, thinking about how far she had come in such a short time. The emotional turbulence, the physical discomfort, and the fear of the unknown had all shaped her into someone more mindful, more patient, and more resilient. She had learned that even when life took unexpected turns, she had the power to adapt, to seek support, and to find peace amidst uncertainty. That awareness gave her a sense of calm she had never experienced before. Her journey was far from over, but the transformation within her was undeniable. She had begun to reclaim control over her life, her body, and her emotions. She had learned that resilience was not about avoiding fear or uncertainty, but about facing them with courage and persistence. The rare condition had altered her path, but it had also taught her a profound lesson. Life could be unpredictable, but she had the inner strength to navigate it, and so, as she prepared for the next stage of treatment, she carried with her a newfound confidence. She knew there would be challenges ahead, moments of doubt and fear, but she also knew she was capable of facing them. With support, self-awareness, and determination, she had begun to transform uncertainty into strength, fear into resilience, and disruption into growth. The road ahead was still long, but she was ready to walk it, one step at a time, with courage and hope. The following weeks were a journey in themselves, full of small victories and gradual adjustments. She had learned to navigate her new reality, but now it was time to focus fully on recovery and moving forward. Every day brought a mix of emotions, hope, curiosity, and sometimes a lingering fear, but she faced them all with a growing sense of resilience. She had learned that life did not always follow the path she imagined, but it was possible to live fully even when the unexpected occurred. She started each day with a routine that helped her feel grounded. Mornings began with a warm cup of tea and a few moments of quiet reflection by the window. She watched the city awaken outside, people going about their lives, and she reminded herself that her own life was continuing too, in spite of uncertainty. This simple practice, only a few minutes long, gave her a sense of stability. It reminded her that even when life changed unexpectedly, she could still create moments of peace and mindfulness for herself. The treatment continued steadily. She followed her doctor's instructions carefully, taking medications, attending appointments, and monitoring her body. It was not always easy. Some days the fatigue returned and she still experienced emotional fluctuations. But she had learned to manage these moments with patience. She reminded herself that recovery was a process, not an instant solution. Each small improvement, each day she felt slightly better, became a milestone, a confirmation that she could regain control over her body and her life. Her support system remained invaluable. Friends and family continued to check in, offering both practical help and emotional encouragement. Sometimes they accompanied her to appointments or simply sat with her in silence, letting her know she was not alone. Their presence made a profound difference. She realized that strength was not only internal, it also came from the people who cared for her, who shared her journey and celebrated small victories with her. Every kind word and gesture reminded her that she was supported and valued. One of the most significant changes during this period was her relationship with her own body. She had previously taken her health for granted, assuming that everything was predictable and stable. Now she paid closer attention, observing changes, noticing signals, and responding with care. She learned to appreciate her body for its resilience even when it had sent her confusing signals. Each day she treated herself with gentleness, giving herself rest when needed and celebrating moments of strength. This new awareness created a deeper connection with herself, one she had never experienced before. Emotionally, she felt a growing sense of balance. She no longer allowed fear to dominate her thoughts. When moments of anxiety arose, she acknowledged them but reminded herself that she had faced uncertainty before and had navigated it successfully. She used strategies she had developed over the previous weeks, journaling, breathing exercises, and speaking openly with friends and family, to maintain her equilibrium. Slowly, she discovered that emotional resilience was as important as physical healing. Both were intertwined, supporting one another as she moved forward.